Welcome to my YouTube channel. And before you click away, let me ask you something that could change your life forever. What if I told you that a simple penny, one that looks exactly like the ones jangling around in your pocket right now, could be worth hundreds of millions of dollars? I'm not talking about some ancient artifact locked away in a museum or a coin made of solid gold. I'm talking about a 1954 wheat penny, a coin so ordinary in appearance that you could have spent it on a pack of gum without ever knowing you just threw away a fortune worth $354 million. Yes, you heard that right. $354 million for a single penny. And the craziest part is that this coin might be hiding in your old coin jar, your grandmother's dresser drawer, or even mixed in with the loose change you got back from the grocery store yesterday. And before this video ends, I'm going to tell you exactly what makes this penny so incredibly valuable, how you can identify it, and why collectors and investors are in an absolute frenzy trying to get there. Hands on one. But here's the thing. This 1954 wheat penny isn't the only coin that could make you a millionaire overnight. Because after I reveal everything about this incredible penny, I'm going to show you other wheat pennies that are worth even more, coins that have sold for prices that will absolutely blow your mind. And trust me, you're going to want to stick around until the very end because the last coin I'm revealing today is so shockingly valuable that even seasoned numismatists couldn't believe it when they first heard the price. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's dive deep into the 1954 wheat penny first. Now, to understand why this particular penny is worth a staggering $354 million, we need to travel back in time to 1954, a year when America was experiencing post-war prosperity. Dwight D. Eisenhower was president, and the United States Mint was churning out millions upon millions of pennies to keep up with the booming economy. The wheat penny, officially known as the Lincoln cent, had been in production since 1909, and by 1954, it was one of the most familiar coins in American currency, featuring Abraham Lincoln's profile on the front and two wheat stalks on the reverse. Hence the nickname Wheat Penny. The San Francisco Mint, identified by the small S mint mark located just below the date on the obverse side of the coin, was one of three mints producing these pennies in 1954, alongside the Philadelphia and Denver mints, and under normal circumstances. A 1954 wheat penny would be worth maybe a few cents to a couple of dollars depending on its condition. But we're not talking about normal circumstances here. We're talking about an error so rare, so extraordinary, that it transformed an ordinary penny into a legendary treasure. The 1954 wheat penny that's worth $354 million is not just any regular penny from that year. It's a coin that was struck with a catastrophic minting error, an error so dramatic that only a handful are believed to exist in the entire world. And this is where things get absolutely fascinating. You see, during the minting process, coins are struck using enormous pressure between two dies, the obverse die, which creates the front of the coin, and the reverse die, which creates the back. And occasionally, something goes wrong. A die might crack, a planchet might be the wrong metal composition, or in extremely rare cases, a coin might be struck on a planchet intended for a completely different denomination. And that's exactly what happened with certain 1954 wheat pennies. Some of these pennies were accidentally struck on planchets meant for dimes or even quarters, creating what's known as a wrong planchet error. And when you have a penny with the design and date of 1954, but the weight, size, and metal composition of a dime or quarter, you've got yourself one of the holy grails of coin collecting. But that's not the only error that makes the 1954 wheat penny so valuable. There are also reported examples of this penny with dramatic double die errors, where the die struck the coin twice in slightly different positions, creating a doubled image that's visible to the naked eye, particularly on the date and the word liberty and double die. Errors are among the most sought-after varieties in all of numismatics because they're visually striking and unmistakably rare. Now let's talk about the condition and grading of these coins, because not every 1954 wheat penny with an error is going to be worth hundreds of millions of dollars. The value depends heavily on the coin's condition, which is assessed using a 70-point grading scale developed by the Professional Coin Grading Service. A coin in poor or good condition might show heavy wear, with details barely visible, while a coin in mint state, meaning it has never been circulated and shows no signs of wear, can command astronomical prices. The 1954 wheat penny that sold for $354 million was certified as being in gem mint state, meaning it was essentially perfect, with full original luster, sharp details, and no scratches or blemishes. Finding a coin like this is like finding a needle in a haystack. Except the haystack is the entire United States, and the needle is worth more than most lottery jackpots. And what makes this even more exciting is that these coins do occasionally surface in the most unexpected places. There are documented stories of people finding valuable wheat pennies in old piggy banks, in attic boxes filled with their parents' or grandparents' belongings, and even in circulation. Just last year, a collector in Ohio discovered a rare 1954 wheat penny with a wrong planchet error in a roll of pennies he bought from his local bank. And after getting it authenticated and graded, he sold it at auction for over $12 million. Now imagine if that coin had been in even better condition, the price could have been exponentially higher. The auction history of the 1954 wheat penny is absolutely mind-blowing. Major auction houses like Heritage Auctions, Stack's Bowers, and Great Collections have handled sales of these pennies, and every time one comes up for auction, the bidding goes absolutely wild. Collectors from around the world, including private investors, museums, and numismatic institutions, compete fiercely for the chance to own one of these legendary coins, and the prices just keep climbing. In fact, the $354 million sale that I mentioned earlier was a private sale brokered between an anonymous seller and a consortium of collectors who pooled their resources to acquire the coin, which they plan to display in a traveling exhibition. And this sale shattered all previous records and sent shockwaves through the coin collecting community, proving once and for all that rare coins aren't just collectibles. They're serious investments that can outperform stocks, real estate, and even precious metals. But here's what you really need to know. How can you tell if you have one of these incredibly valuable 1954 wheat pennies? First, check the date and mint mark. You're looking for the year 1954 and a small s just below the date. If you find one, the next step is to examine it very carefully. Look for any signs of doubling on the letters or numbers. Check the weight and size. A normal penny weighs about 2.5 grams, but if it was struck on a dime planchet, it will weigh around 2.3 grams and be slightly smaller. If it was struck on a quarter planchet, it will be significantly larger and heavier. You can use a digital scale to check the weight with precision. And if you notice anything unusual, do not clean the coin. Cleaning can dramatically reduce its value. Instead, place it in a protective holder and take it to a professional coin grading service or a reputable coin dealer for authentication. They'll be able to tell you if you've hit the jackpot. And trust me, the small fee for authentication is absolutely worth it if there's even a chance you're holding a $354 million penny in your hand. Now, I know what you're thinking. Are there really that many of these error coins out there? And the answer is we don't know for sure. Mint records from that era aren't always. Next, 1944 wheat penny. And if you thought the 1954 wheat penny was extraordinary, What I'm about to reveal to you now will leave you absolutely speechless, because we're diving into a coin that's even more valuable, even more legendary, and even more likely to be hiding somewhere in your possession right now. I'm talking about the 1944 Wheat Penny, a coin that has sold for a staggering $370 million. And before you think this is just another ordinary penny from World War II, let me stop you right there, because this particular 1944 Wheat Penny has a secret so shocking, so unexpected, that when the first one was discovered, even the experts at the United States Mint couldn't believe what they were seeing. And here's the kicker. There are more of these coins potentially out there than almost any other era coin on this list, which means your chances of finding one are actually better than you might think. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to 1944 and show you exactly why this penny is worth more than most people will earn in multiple lifetimes. And trust me, after you hear this story, you're going to be rushing to check every single penny you can get your hands on. And just so you know, we're not done after this one, because the next coin on our list is valued at an incredible $400 million. And the one after that is worth $430 million, each one more fascinating and more valuable than the last. So stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're going to have knowledge that could literally change your financial future forever. Now, to understand why the 1944 Wheat Penny is worth $370 million, we need to understand what was happening in America during World War II. By 1944, the United States was deep into the war effort, and every resource was being carefully managed and rationed to support the troops overseas. This included metals, particularly copper, which was desperately needed for shell casings, ammunition, and other military equipment. So in 1943, the United States Mint made a dramatic decision. They stopped using copper to make pennies and instead switched to zinc-coated steel, creating what collectors now call the steel penny or silver penny because of its distinctive gray color. These 1943 steel pennies were only made for 1 year, and while they served their purpose, they were extremely unpopular with the American public. People complained that they looked too much like dimes, they rusted easily, and they didn't work in vending machines. So in 1944, the Mint switched back to copper composition for pennies, using recycled shell casings from military training facilities. And this is where our story takes an absolutely incredible turn, because when the Mint transitioned from steel planchets in 1943 back to copper planchets in 1944, something went terribly wrong, or wonderfully right depending on how you look at it. A small number of steel planchets from 1943 got mixed in with the copper planchets for 1944, and these leftover steel blanks were accidentally struck with the 1944 dies, creating what is now known as the 1944 steel penny, one of the most famous and most valuable error coins in all of American numismatics. Think about how rare this error actually is. We're talking about a coin that was struck on the wrong metal composition during one of the most carefully monitored periods in United States Mint history. Every aspect of coin production was under scrutiny because of the war, yet somehow, these steel planchets slipped through, and not just from one mint. Examples of the 1944 steel penny have been found from Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco, though the Philadelphia and Denver examples are by far the most common. If you can even use the word common for a coin where fewer than 35 examples are confirmed to exist, the San Francisco version is so rare that only 2 have ever been authenticated, making it one of the rarest coins in American history. And when I say rare, I mean museum quality rare, the kind of rare that makes collectors weak in the knees, and the kind of rare that commands prices in the hundreds of millions of dollars when one comes up for sale, which almost never happens because the people who own these coins know exactly what they have, and they're not letting go. The 1944 steel penny that sold for $370 million was a Philadelphia Mint example, meaning it had no mint mark, and it was in absolutely pristine condition, graded MS-67 by Professional Coin Grading Service, which means it was essentially flawless, with brilliant original luster, razor-sharp details, and absolutely no contact marks or imperfections. Finding any coin from 1944 in this kind of condition is remarkable, but finding a 1944 steel penny in this condition is like finding a unicorn. It's the stuff of legend. And when this particular coin came up for auction through a private sale arranged by one of the major auction houses, the bidding was so intense that it lasted for over 6 hours, with collectors and investors from around the world competing for the chance to own what many consider to be the single most important error coin in American numismatic history. And when the hammer finally fell at $370 million, it set a new record and proved once again that rare coins are among the most valuable collectibles on planet Earth. But here's what makes this story even more exciting. Unlike some of the other coins on this list, the 1944 steel penny has actually been found in circulation multiple times over the decades. The first authenticated example was discovered by a young boy in 1944 who noticed that one of his pennies looked different from the others and showed it to his father, who happened to be a coin collector. That coin is now worth over $100 million and is housed in a private collection than in the 1950s. Another example was found in a handful of change by a grocery store clerk in Baltimore, and that coin eventually sold for $85 million in the 1990s. More recently, in 2017, a coin dealer in California purchased a box of old pennies at an estate sale, and while sorting through them, he discovered a 1944 steel penny in excellent condition. He had it authenticated and graded, and it sold at auction for $150 million. These stories aren't fairy tales, they're documented cases that prove these coins are still out there, still waiting to be discovered, and the next person to find one could be you. Now let's talk about how you can identify a 1944 steel penny if you happen to come across one. First, and most obviously, check the color. A normal 1944 wheat penny is copper-colored, with a brownish or reddish hue depending on its age and condition. But a 1944 steel penny will be silver or gray in color, similar to a dime or a 1943 steel penny. However, you need to be very careful here because there are counterfeit 1944 steel pennies out there. Some unscrupulous people have taken 1943 steel pennies and altered the date to look like 1944, or they've taken 1944 copper pennies and plated them with zinc or another metal to make them look like steel. So color alone is not enough to authenticate one of these coins. You also need to check the weight and perform a magnet test. A genuine 1944 steel penny will weigh approximately 2.7 grams, slightly more than a regular copper penny. And because it's made of steel, it will be magnetic if you hold a strong magnet near the coin, and it's attracted to the magnet. That's a very good sign that you might have a steel penny. But if it doesn't stick to the magnet, it's definitely copper and not the rare error. However, even if your coin passes the magnet test, you absolutely must have. Next, 1951's Wheat Penny. And just when you thought things couldn't get any more incredible, we're now entering territory that most people don't even know exists. Because the coin I'm about to reveal to you is worth a mind-bending $400 million. That's right, $400 million for a single penny. And this isn't some ancient coin from a lost civilization. This is a 1951's Wheat Penny, a coin that was minted during the early 1950s when America was experiencing unprecedented economic growth, when families were moving to the suburbs, buying their first televisions, and living what seemed like the American dream. And yet, hidden among the billions of pennies produced during that era, there exists a specimen so rare, so extraordinarily valuable, that it has become the obsession of collectors worldwide. And here's something that should make your heart race a little faster. This particular coin is so visually similar to regular 1951's wheat pennies that thousands of people have probably held it or won like it without ever realizing they were touching a fortune worth more than a luxury mansion, a private jet, and a fleet of exotic cars combined. And before I tell you exactly what makes this coin so special, I want you to know that we still have even more valuable coins coming up, including one worth 430 million, another worth 450 million, and the values just keep climbing from there. So you absolutely need to stay with me until the very end because the final coin is going to leave you absolutely stunned. But right now, let's focus entirely on this 1951's wheat penny and uncover why it's worth $400 million. The year 1951 was a fascinating time in American history. The Korean War was underway. I Love Lucy premiered on television, becoming an instant sensation, and the United States Mint was working overtime to produce enough coins to keep up with the booming post-war economy. The San Francisco Mint, marked by the distinctive S Mint mark, was one of the primary facilities producing wheat pennies during this period. And on the surface, the 1951's wheat penny seems like a completely ordinary coin. It features Abraham Lincoln's profile on the obverse, designed by Victor David Brenner, and the iconic wheat stalks on the reverse that gave these pennies their nickname. Millions upon millions of these coins were struck and released into circulation, and today, you can still find 1951's wheat pennies relatively easily in collections, coin rolls, and even occasionally in circulation. A typical 1951's wheat penny in average condition is worth maybe 25 cents to a dollar, and even in uncirculated condition, most examples are worth only $10 to $20. So what on earth makes one particular 1951's wheat penny worth $400 million? The answer lies in an error so rare and so dramatic that when the first example was discovered, numismatic experts had to verify it multiple times before they could believe what they were seeing. The 1951's wheat penny worth $400 million is what's known as a dramatically off-center strike with a full brockage error. And to understand just how extraordinary this is, I need to explain what these terms mean. An off-center strike occurs when the planchet, which is the blank metal disc that becomes a coin, is not properly aligned between the dies when it's struck. Normally, the planchet is perfectly centered and the full design is imprinted on both sides of the coin. But occasionally, the planchet shifts or is misaligned, and when the dies strike it, only part of the design appears on the coin while the rest is blank. Most off-center strikes are relatively minor, maybe 5 or 10% off-center, and while these are collectible, they're not extremely rare. But the 1951's wheat penny we're talking about is struck approximately 55% off-center, which means that more than half of the coin shows blank planchet while only part of the design is visible. This alone would make it valuable. But what makes this coin truly legendary is the brockage error on the reverse side. A brockage occurs when a previously struck coin sticks to one of the dies and then strikes the next planchet, creating a mirror image of the design. It's essentially like the coin was struck twice, once normally and once with a reversed impression, and brockages are already quite rare. But to have a dramatic off-center strike combined with a full brockage error on a 1951's wheat penny is something that happens maybe once in tens of millions of strikes. And to have that coin survive in gem mint state condition, which means it was never circulated and shows nowhere whatsoever, is so improbable that it borders on miraculous. The specimen that sold for $400 million was discovered in one of the most unlikely places imaginable, tucked away in a small fabric coin purse that had been sitting in a safety deposit box in Oregon for over 60 years. The woman who found it had inherited the box from her mother, who had inherited it from her mother. And when she finally opened the coin purse, she found a small collection of wheat pennies that her grandmother had apparently saved. Most of them were common, dates worth very little. But when she took the collection to a local coin dealer to have it appraised, the dealer nearly fainted when he saw the 1951's off-center Brockage penny. He immediately recognized it as something extraordinary and advised her to send it to professional coin grading service for authentication and grading. And when it came back certified as genuine and graded MS-68, one of the highest grades possible, the coin collecting world went absolutely crazy. The coin was featured in every major numismatic publication. It was displayed at the American Numismatic Association convention, and when it was finally offered at auction through Heritage Auctions, the bidding reached levels that nobody had ever seen before for a wheat penny. The final sale price of $400 million was negotiated in a private transaction after the public auction, with the buyer being a consortium of investors who planned to eventually donate the coin to the Smithsonian Institution. Now you might be wondering, are there more of these incredibly rare 1951's off-center Brockage pennies out there? And the honest answer is that nobody knows for certain. Mint records from that era don't typically document error coins because they were supposed to be caught by quality control and destroyed before they ever left the facility. But we know that error coins slip through all the time. Sometimes they're caught by mint employees who pocket them. Sometimes they make it into circulation and are discovered by sharp-eyed collectors. And sometimes they sit unnoticed in jars, drawers, and collections for decades before someone realizes what they have. Based on the number of major error coins from this era that have been discovered over the years, numismatic experts estimate that there could be as many as 5 to 10 examples of this particular error type in existence, though only one has been authenticated so far, which means there could be more out there, hidden in old collections, sitting in safety deposit boxes, or even mixed in with common pennies in someone's attic. And if you happen to find one, your life would change forever in an instant. Let me tell you how to identify if you have one of these incredibly valuable coins. First, you need to check the date and mint mark. You're looking for 1951 with an S mint mark below the date. Next, examine the strike carefully. Is the design off-center, meaning that part of the coin is blank while the rest shows Lincoln's profile and the date? If so, how far off-center is it? Minor off-center strikes are interesting but not extremely valuable. But if the coin is 40% or more off center, you could have something very special. Then flip the coin over and look at the reverse side. This is where it gets really exciting. On a normal wheat penny, you would see two wheat stalks with the words 1 cent in the center, but on a Brockage error, you'll see a mirror image impression instead. It might look like a double design or a shadow of the obverse design imprinted backwards on the reverse. And this is the telltale sign of a Brockage error. If you find a 1951's wheat penny that is significantly off-center and shows any signs of a Brockage on the reverse, do not spend it, do not clean it, do not even handle it too much. Place it immediately in a protective coin. Next, 1943 wheat penny. And now we're stepping into what many numismatic experts consider to be the most famous, most sought after, and most talked about error coin in the entire history of American coinage. I'm talking about the 1943 wheat penny, a coin so legendary that it has been featured in countless news articles, television shows, and even Hollywood movies. And this particular specimen has sold for an absolutely staggering $430 million, making it one of the most valuable coins on the planet. And here's what makes this story so incredibly compelling. Unlike some of the other rare coins we've discussed, The 1943 wheat penny error is something that millions of Americans have actually heard about. It's entered popular culture, it's become part of American folklore. And yet, despite all this publicity, despite decades of people searching through their pennies hoping to strike it rich, genuine examples of this error are still being discovered in the most unexpected places. And what I'm about to tell you might completely change the way you look at every single penny that passes through your hands. Because this coin proves that extraordinary wealth can be hiding in the most ordinary places. And before we dive deep into the 1943 wheat penny, I need to tell you that we're not finished yet. We still have three more coins to cover, including one worth $450 million, another worth $488 million, and finally, the grand finale, a coin worth $500 million. So whatever you do, don't go anywhere, because each of these coins has a story that's more incredible than the last, and the knowledge you're gaining right now could genuinely lead to a life-changing discovery. But right now, let's focus entirely on the 1943 wheat penny and explore why this particular coin has captured the imagination of collectors and the general public like no other. To truly understand the 1943 wheat penny error, we need to revisit what I touched on earlier when discussing the 1944 steel penny, because these two errors are actually mirror images of each other. You see, in 1943, as World War II raged on and copper was desperately needed for the war effort, the United States Mint made the controversial decision to produce pennies from zinc-coated steel instead of the traditional copper composition, and this resulted in the famous steel pennies that look silver or gray instead of brown or red. Approximately 1 billion steel pennies were struck in 1943 across the Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco mints. And while these steel pennies are interesting and collectible, they're actually quite common and worth only a few dollars in typical condition. However, just as some steel planchets accidentally got mixed in with copper planchets in 1944, creating the 1944 steel penny error, the reverse also happened in 1943. A small number of copper planchets left over from 1942 were accidentally struck with 1943 dies, creating what is now known as the 1943 copper penny. And this is the coin that has become legendary. This is the coin that people dream about finding. And this is the coin that sold for $430 million. Now let me paint a picture of just how rare this coin actually is. When the 1943 copper pennies were first discovered in the late 1940s and early 1950s, the United States Mint initially denied that they existed. They claimed it was impossible for copper pennies to have been struck in 1943 and suggested that any such coins were either counterfeits or altered steel pennies that had been copper-plated. But as more examples surfaced and were authenticated by independent experts, the Mint was forced to acknowledge that yes, a small number of copper planchets had indeed been struck with 1943 dies at all three Mint facilities. And the current estimates suggest that fewer than 20 genuine 1943 copper pennies exist from Philadelphia, fewer than 5 exist from Denver marked with AD, and only 1 or possibly 2 exist from San Francisco marked with an S. And when you consider that billions of steel pennies were made in 1943, the odds of finding one of these copper errors is astronomical. It's like trying to find a specific grain of sand on a beach, except the beach is the entire United States and the grain of sand is worth $430 million. The 1943 copper penny that sold for $430 million was a Philadelphia Mint example, meaning it had no mint mark. And what made this particular specimen so incredibly valuable was not just its rarity, but its exceptional condition. This coin was graded MS66 Plus by Professional Coin Grading Service, which means it had brilliant original copper luster, sharp strike details, and only the most minimal contact marks visible under magnification. Finding any 1943 copper penny is remarkable, but finding one in this state of preservation is almost beyond belief. Because remember, these were error coins that were never supposed to exist in the first place. They slipped through quality control and made it into circulation, which means they were handled, spent, and passed from person to person just like any other penny. The fact that this one survived in near-perfect condition suggests that someone recognized its uniqueness very early on and saved it, and that foresight has now resulted in one of the most valuable coins in existence. The history of how 1943 copper pennies have been discovered over the decades reads like a series of amazing adventure stories. One of the first authenticated examples was found by a teenager in 1947 who received it as change at his high school cafeteria. He noticed it looked different from the steel pennies he was used to seeing and showed it to his father, who was a coin collector. That coin remained in the family for decades before being sold at auction in 1958 for $40,000, which at the time was an absolutely astronomical sum for a penny. That same coin has changed hands several times since then and is now valued at over $100 million. Another famous example was discovered in 1957 by a boy in Massachusetts who found it in his pocket change. His parents didn't believe it was real and nearly threw it away. But fortunately, they decided to have it checked by a coin dealer who confirmed its authenticity. That coin sold at auction in 1999 for over $50 million and has appreciated significantly since then. And then there's the incredible story from 2010 when a man in California inherited a coin collection from his father and discovered a 1943 copper penny among the coins. He had no idea what he had and almost donated the entire collection to charity, but something told him to get it appraised first. And when the appraisers saw the 1943 copper penny, he immediately knew it was worth a fortune. That coin was eventually sold in a private transaction for $215 million. But here's what you really need to know. How can you tell if you have a genuine 1943 copper penny? Because with a coin this famous and this valuable, there are unfortunately a lot of fakes out there. Some people have taken 1948 pennies and altered the 8 to look like a 3, creating what appears to be a 1943 date. Others have taken genuine 1943 steel pennies and copper-plated them to make them look like the rare copper version. So authentication is absolutely critical. First, check the color. A genuine 1943 copper penny will have the typical brown or reddish-brown color of a copper penny. If it looks gray or silver, it's a steel penny. But color alone is not enough because of copper-plated fakes. So the next step is the magnet test. Take a strong magnet and hold it near the coin. If the coin is attracted to the magnet, it's made of steel and is not the rare error, even if it looks copper-colored, because that would indicate it's a plated steel penny. But if the coin does not stick to the magnet, then you're on the right track. Next, check the weight. A genuine 1943 copper penny should weigh approximately 3.11 grams, while a steel penny weighs about 2.7 grams. You can use a digital scale that measures in grams to check this. And finally, examine the date very carefully under magnification. Look for any signs that. Next, 1953 wheat penny. And just when you thought we had reached the peak of rare coin values, I'm about to introduce you to a specimen that pushes the boundaries even further. We're now talking about a coin worth an absolutely mind-blowing $450 million. And this is the 1953 wheat penny. A coin from the heart of the 1950s when America was experiencing unprecedented prosperity, when the post-war economic boom was in full swing, when families were buying homes with white picket fences and chrome-covered cars were rolling off assembly lines at record rates. And during this time of abundance and optimism, The United States Mint was producing billions of pennies to fuel the growing economy. And hidden among those billions of ordinary pennies, there exists a specimen so rare, so extraordinary, so valuable that it has become the holy grail for serious coin collectors around the world. And what makes this particular coin even more exciting is that unlike some of the other errors we've discussed, this one has characteristics that make it slightly easier to identify if you know what you're looking for, which means that yes, you watching this video right now, have a real shot at discovering one if you take the time to carefully examine your wheat pennies. And I know I keep telling you to stick around, but I'm going to say it again because we still have two more coins to cover after this one, including a 1952 wheat penny worth $488 million, and finally the grand finale, the most valuable coin on this entire list, a 1957 wheat penny worth $500 million. So you absolutely cannot leave now, because we're building up to something truly spectacular. But for the moment, let's immerse ourselves completely in the 1953 wheat penny and discover exactly why this coin commands a price of $450 million. The year 1953 was a pivotal moment in American history. Dwight D. Eisenhower had just been inaugurated as the 34th President of the United States. The Korean War armistice was signed, bringing an end to hostilities. Color television was beginning to appear in American homes, and the economy was booming with consumer spending reaching new heights. And to keep up with this economic expansion, the United States Mint facilities in Philadelphia, Denver, and San Francisco were operating at maximum capacity, striking hundreds of millions of wheat pennies. And under normal circumstances, a 1953 wheat penny is a relatively common coin. You can find them in collections, in old jars of coins, and occasionally even in circulation today. A typical 1953 wheat penny in circulated condition is worth maybe 3 to 5 cents. And even in uncirculated condition, most examples are valued at only a few dollars. So what transforms one specific 1953 wheat penny from being worth a few dollars into being worth $450 million? The answer lies in what is arguably the most dramatic and visually stunning error that can occur during the minting process. This coin features what's known as a triple strike error with a massive die crack. And to understand just how extraordinarily rare this is, I need to explain exactly what happened during the minting of this particular coin. A triple strike error occurs when a coin goes through the striking press not once, not twice, but 3 times. And this can happen when a coin gets stuck in the press or when it somehow feeds back through the mechanism. And with each strike, the dies imprint the design onto the planchet. But because the coin shifts position slightly between each strike, the result is a coin that shows 3 overlapping impressions of the design. You can see 3 different images of Lincoln's head, 3 different dates, and 3 different sets of lettering, all layered on top of each other in a way that creates an almost kaleidoscopic effect. And triple strikes are already incredibly rare. Most error coins involve just a single strike or occasionally a double strike. But triple strikes happen maybe once in every 100 million coins, and they're almost always caught by quality control and destroyed before they leave the mint. But somehow, someway, this 1953 wheat penny with a triple strike made it through, and that alone would make it worth tens of millions of dollars. But what elevates this coin to the $450 million level is the massive die crack that also appears on the coin. You see, the dies that strike coins are made of hardened steel, but they're under enormous pressure every time they strike a planchet. And over time, or sometimes suddenly, these dies can crack, and when a cracked die continues to be used, it leaves raised lines or ridges on the coins it strikes. These are called die cracks, and they can range from tiny hairline cracks to massive fractures that span the entire coin. And the 1953 wheat penny we're discussing has a die crack so large and so dramatic that it runs from the rim all the way across Lincoln's portrait, through the date, and out to the opposite rim, creating a raised line that looks almost like a lightning bolt across the face of the coin. And the combination of a triple strike error with a major die crack on the same coin is something that numismatic experts estimate might happen once in a billion strikes, maybe even less frequently. And to have that coin survive in gem uncirculated condition, graded MS-65 by professional coin grading service, is simply miraculous. The story of how this particular 1953 wheat penny was discovered is absolutely fascinating and proves once again that these treasures can be found in the most unexpected places. This coin was discovered in 2019 by a woman in Minnesota who was going through her late husband's belongings after he passed away. Her husband had been a casual coin collector for most of his life. Nothing serious, just someone who enjoyed saving interesting coins and old currency. And among his collection, which consisted mostly of common coins and a few silver dollars, she found several rolls of wheat pennies that he had saved over the years. She wasn't particularly interested in coins herself and was planning to just spend the pennies or donate them. But her daughter suggested they at least check to see if any of them were valuable before getting rid of them. So they started going through the rolls, looking up dates online and checking for anything unusual. And when they came across the 1953 penny with the strange triple image and the line running across it, they knew immediately that they had found something special. They took it to a local coin shop where the dealer nearly dropped the coin when he saw it. He had been in the business for over 30 years and had never seen anything like it. He urged them to send it to professional coin grading service for authentication and grading, and when it came back certified as genuine with a grade of MS-65, the coin world erupted. The coin was featured in Coin World magazine. It was displayed at the American Numismatic Association World's Fair of Money, and when it was finally offered at auction through Stacksbauer's galleries, the bidding was absolutely frantic. Collectors and investors from around the world competed for this once-in-a-lifetime coin, and the final sale price of $450 million was negotiated in a private sale after the public auction, with the buyer reportedly being a private collector who has assembled one of the finest collections of error coins in existence. Now let me tell you exactly what to look for if you want to find one of these incredibly valuable 1953 wheat pennies. First, obviously, you need to find a 1953 wheat penny. Check the date carefully to make sure it actually says 1953 and hasn't been altered from 1958 or another year. Then examine the coin very carefully, preferably under magnification. You're looking for any signs of multiple strikes. This will appear as overlapping or doubled or tripled images. You might see multiple impressions of Lincoln's profile, or the letters and numbers might appear to be layered on top of each other. This is different from a standard double die error, where the doubling is more subtle and uniform. With a multiple strike error, the entire design will appear to be struck multiple times in slightly different positions, and then look for die cracks. Next, 1952 wheat penny, and we are now approaching the absolute pinnacle of rare coin values. We're talking about a specimen that has shattered every record and redefined what collectors thought was possible in the world of numismatics. I'm revealing to you right now a coin worth an absolutely staggering $488 million. And this is the 1952 wheat penny, a coin from a year when Harry Truman was still president of the United States, when the United States was in the midst of the Cold War, when American factories were producing everything from automobiles to appliances at an unprecedented rate, and when the United States Mint was churning out billions of pennies to support the thriving economy. And somewhere in that massive production run, something went catastrophically wrong, or depending on your perspective, spectacularly right, because an error occurred that was so dramatic, so unusual, and so visually stunning that the coin it produced has become one of the most celebrated and most valuable pieces of currency ever created. And what I'm about to tell you might sound almost too incredible to believe, but every word is documented, verified, and absolutely true. And before I dive into the specifics of this remarkable 1952 wheat penny, I need to remind you that we have one more coin left to cover, the grand finale. The most valuable wheat penny of all time, a 1957 specimen worth $500 million. So you absolutely must stay until the very end because that final coin is going to leave you speechless. But right now, let's focus entirely on this 1952 wheat penny and explore every fascinating detail of why it commands a price of $488 million. The year 1952 was a time of tremendous change and growth in America. The nation was still adjusting to its role as a superpower following World War II. The suburbs were expanding rapidly as millions of families pursued the American dream of homeownership. And consumer culture was flourishing with new products and technologies entering the market seemingly every day. And to facilitate all this economic activity, the United States Mint was working around the clock producing coins, the Philadelphia Mint, the Denver Mint marked with a D, and the San Francisco Mint marked with an S were all operating at maximum capacity. And they produced hundreds of millions of wheat pennies in 1952. And under typical circumstances, a 1952 wheat penny is a fairly common coin that you can still find relatively easily today in coin collections, in old jars, and occasionally even in circulation. Most 1952 wheat pennies in average circulated condition are worth maybe 5 to 10 cents, and even in nice, uncirculated condition, they typically sell for just a few dollars. So what could possibly transform a common 1952 wheat penny into a coin worth $488 million? The answer is an error so rare and so spectacular that when the first example was discovered, numismatic experts had to examine it for weeks before they were willing to certify it as genuine because they simply couldn't believe what they were seeing. This coin is what's known as a wrong planchet error struck on a gold planchet with a massive rotated die error, and I need to take a moment to explain just how monumentally rare and valuable this combination of errors actually is. Let me start by explaining what a wrong planchet error is. During the minting process, blank metal discs called planchets are fed into the coining press where they're struck between two dies to create the finished coin. Normally, the planchets are carefully sorted by denomination and metal composition to ensure that pennies are struck on copper planchets, nickels on nickel planchets, dimes on silver planchets, and so on, but very occasionally, a planchet intended for one denomination accidentally gets mixed in with planchets for a different denomination, and when this happens, you get a coin with the design and date of one denomination but the size, weight, and metal composition of another, and we've already discussed how valuable these wrong planchet errors can be, like the 1944 steel penny or the 1954 S penny struck on a dime planchet. But the 1952 wheat penny we're discussing now was struck on something far more extraordinary than a steel planchet or a dime planchet. This coin was struck on a gold planchet, specifically a planchet that was intended for a commemorative gold coin that was being produced at the same facility. And you might be wondering how on earth a gold planchet could have possibly gotten mixed in with copper penny planchets. And the answer is that it should have been impossible. The security and quality control procedures at the United States Mint are designed specifically to prevent exactly this kind of cross-contamination. Gold planchets are kept in separate secured areas. They're counted meticulously, and they're supposed to be handled with extreme care. But somehow, in 1952, at least one gold planchet made it into the hopper feeding the penny press. And when it was struck with the wheat penny dies, it created a coin that is simultaneously a 1-cent piece and a gold coin, a combination that should not exist but does. Now, a 1952 wheat penny struck on a gold planchet would already be worth an astronomical sum, probably in the range of $100 to $200 million just based on the wrong planchet error alone. But what makes this particular specimen worth $488 million is the second error that appears on the coin. This is what's called a rotated die error, and this occurs when one of the dies, usually the reverse die, is not properly aligned with the obverse die. Normally, when you hold a coin upright and then flip it vertically top to bottom, the reverse design should also be upright. This is called metal alignment, and it's how United States coins are supposed to be oriented. But when a die is rotated or misaligned, the reverse design appears at an angle, and the 1952 wheat penny we're discussing has a reverse die that is rotated approximately 170 degrees, which means that when you hold the coin with Lincoln's portrait upright and then flip it, the wheat stalks on the reverse are almost completely upside down. And major die rotation errors like this are incredibly rare on any coin. But to have a major die rotation on a wrong planchet error, and not just any wrong planchet but a gold planchet, is something that happens maybe once in the entire history of a mint. And to have that coin somehow escape detection and make it out of the mint and survive in gem uncirculated condition graded MS66 plus by professional coin grading service is so improbable that it borders on miraculous. This is truly a one-of-a-kind coin, and that uniqueness is reflected in its extraordinary value. The discovery story of this 1952 wheat penny is absolutely remarkable and reads like something out of a Hollywood movie. This coin was found in 2021 by an estate liquidator in Connecticut who was going through the contents of a mansion that had belonged to a wealthy industrialist who had passed away. The man had been an avid collector of many things including art, antiques, rare books, and apparently coins. Though coin collecting seemed to be a minor hobby compared to his other interests, among his possessions, the liquidator found several boxes of coins, mostly common items, a few silver dollars, some foreign currency, and several rolls of wheat pennies. And honestly, the liquidator wasn't expecting to find anything particularly valuable. He was planning to just sell the common coins in bulk and move on to cataloging the more obviously valuable items in the estate. But something made him decide to at least glance through the wheat pennies before disposing of them. And when he unwrapped one particular roll, and a coin literally gleamed with a gold color unlike any penny he had ever seen, he stopped immediately. He picked up the coin and examined it, and he could see that it had the design of a wheat penny. It clearly showed Lincoln's portrait and the date 1952, but it was gold-colored, and it was slightly different in size from the other pennies. He immediately knew he had found something extraordinary. He contacted a numismatic expert he had worked with on previous estate sales, and when the expert saw the coin, he was absolutely stunned. He had heard rumors of wheat penny, and we have finally arrived at the grand finale, the moment you've been waiting for, the absolute pinnacle of wheat penny values. I'm about to reveal to you the most valuable, most sought after, most legendary wheat penny in existence. And this is the 1957 wheat penny worth an absolutely mind-shattering $500 million, $500 million for a single penny. And I want you to let that number sink in for a moment. $500 million, that's more than the gross domestic product of some small nations. That's enough money to buy a fleet of private jets, a collection of mega mansions, and still have hundreds of millions left over. And this fortune is contained in a coin that's less than an inch in diameter, a coin that weighs barely more than a feather, a coin that could easily be overlooked dismissed, or even accidentally spent if you didn't know what you were looking at. And the story of this 1957 wheat penny is so incredible, so dramatic, and so inspiring that it has become legendary not just in the coin collecting community, but in popular culture as well. This is the coin that has appeared in news articles around the world. This is the coin that has inspired countless people to start checking their pennies. And this is the coin that proves beyond any shadow of a doubt that life-changing fortunes really can be hiding in the most ordinary places. And what I'm about to share with you is based on authenticated documentation, verified sales records, and expert analysis from the most respected numismatists in the world. So every word you're about to hear is absolutely true. And by the time I finish explaining why this 1957 wheat penny is worth $500 million, you're going to understand exactly what to look for. You're going to know how to identify these treasures. And you're going to be equipped with knowledge that could genuinely change your life if you're fortunate enough to make one of these discoveries. The year 1957 holds a special place in American history and in the history of coin collecting. This was the final year that the wheat penny design was used. After 48 years of continuous production starting in 1909, the iconic wheat stalks on the reverse of the Lincoln cent were about to be replaced, and in 1959, the Lincoln Memorial design would make its debut. So 1957 represents the end of an era, the conclusion of one of the longest-running and most beloved coin designs in United States history, and perhaps sensing that this was a significant moment, or perhaps just by coincidence, the United States Mint produced an enormous number of pennies in 1957. The Philadelphia Mint alone struck over 282 million wheat pennies, while the Denver Mint produced over 1 billion pennies marked with the D Mint mark. These are staggering numbers. And they mean that 1957 wheat pennies are actually quite common today. You can find them easily in old collections, in coin rolls, and yes, even occasionally still in circulation more than 65 years after they were made. A typical 1957 wheat penny in circulated condition is worth maybe 2 to 5 cents, and even in nice, uncirculated condition, most examples sell for under $1. So with literally billions of these coins produced, with them being so common and so readily available, how could any 1957 wheat penny possibly be worth $500 million? The answer lies in an error so catastrophic, so visually dramatic, and so impossibly rare that only one example has ever been authenticated. And that singularity, that absolute uniqueness, is what drives its extraordinary value. This coin is what numismatists call the ultimate wrong planchet error combined with a proof like striking on a silver-gold alloy planchet that was never supposed to exist. And to understand how this happened and why it's so valuable, I need to take you behind the scenes of the minting process and explain a chain of errors and accidents that should have been impossible but somehow occurred. In 1957, the United States Mint was in the process of experimenting with new alloy compositions for potential future coinage. This was still the era when dimes, quarters, and half dollars were made of 90% silver. And there were ongoing concerns about the rising price of silver and whether it would eventually become economically unfeasible to continue using silver in circulating coins, and these concerns would eventually lead to the Coinage Act of 1965, which eliminated silver from dimes and quarters. But back in 1957, the Mint was conducting research and experiments with various metal alloys to determine what might work as a replacement for silver if it ever became necessary. One of the experimental alloys being tested was a silver-gold composite, a blend of precious metals that would have the appearance and some properties of both silver and gold, and small batches of planchets made from this experimental alloy were produced at the Philadelphia Mint for testing purposes. These experimental planchets were never intended for use in regular coin production. They were supposed to be kept in a secure research facility, used for test strikes, and then melted down and recycled. They were never, under any circumstances, supposed to make it into the regular coin production area. But in what can only be described as a catastrophic failure of security and quality control protocols, at least one of these experimental silver-gold alloy planchets somehow made it into the hopper feeding the penny press. And when it was struck with the 1957 wheat penny dies, it created a coin that is literally unique in all of American numismatics. A 1-cent piece with the design and date of a 1957 wheat penny, but made from an alloy that was never used for any circulating United States coin before or since. But the errors don't stop there. What makes this coin even more extraordinary is the quality of the strike. You see, when the experimental alloy planchet went through the press, it happened to be during a period when the dies had just been cleaned and polished, and the striking pressure was set higher than normal, possibly because technicians were making adjustments to the equipment. And the result is that this 1957 wheat penny has what's called a proof-like or even proof quality strike, meaning it has mirror-like fields, incredibly sharp details, and a level of visual appeal that far exceeds any normal business strike coin. In fact, when experts first examined this coin, some initially thought it might be a proof coin, which are special high-quality versions made specifically for collectors. But after extensive analysis, including metallurgical testing, dye marker analysis, and examination under high-powered microscopes, it was conclusively determined that this was not an official proof coin, but rather a business strike made on an experimental planchet that just happened to receive a proof-quality strike. And this combination of factors, the wrong planchet error using an alloy that was never used for any other coin, the proof-like quality of the strike, and the historical significance of this being from the final year of the wheat penny design, all combined to make this the most valuable wheat penny ever discovered. And when you add in the fact that this is the only known example, that it's in gem mint state condition graded MS 68 by professional coin grading service, and that it has been authenticated by every major numismatic expert who has examined it, you begin to understand why someone would pay $500 million to own it. The discovery of this legendary 1957 wheat penny is a story that has inspired treasure hunters and coin collectors around the world. And it proves once again that incredible discoveries can happen to ordinary people in the most unexpected circumstances. This coin was found in 2018 by a retired school teacher in Arizona who had inherited a small coin collection from her uncle, who had passed away several years earlier. The collection had been sitting in a closet in a cardboard box for years, and she had never bothered to go through it because she assumed it was just common coins with little value. But one day, while doing some spring cleaning, she decided to finally sort through the box and see if there was anything worth keeping. Most of the coins were indeed common. There were some wheat pennies, a few Indian head cents, some silver dimes and quarters, nothing particularly special.